Okay guys, I'm back as promised. I'm quite tired, so this video is going to be done in sections. I do apologise, there's no fancy split screen or anything. I'm holding the camera. I'm going to take you through the first part of this imagery question, which is A, and I think from the opening paragraph you can get a good sense as to what the main ideas and central themes of the story are. But question 2, so reread the descriptions of A, the zookeeper in paragraph 1 beginning, the boy stared. Okay, apologies as well because it is currently raining quite heavy. Okay, so this opening here is quite important. It tells us that the story is set 100 years in the future. It describes a boy and his father on their regular visit to the zoo. The father remembers visiting the zoo 50 years earlier when he was a boy and when the zoo was busier. And we've got this pertinent piece of information here that the zookeeper has worked there since the day the zoo first opened. So we're dealing with someone quite old, someone who's been quite dedicated to his job and indeed looking after the animals. Again, these annotations may well be a distraction, or they may well be help. They may well be some of the things that you've got down, hopefully. But let's have a little read of the paragraph. So the boy stared at the zookeeper hobbling along. So it starts with the boy being the main focus, and we've got this verb stared, and this really is the start of the boy's curiosity, or I put here obsession, with the zookeeper. Note that he's obsessed or curious as to who the zookeeper is, his life, how he's acting, the way he looks. He's not necessarily obsessed with the animals. And then we find out the zookeeper is hobbling along. We've got this verb here, and we've got lots of verbs actually throughout this paragraph 1. We've got this verb hobbling, and you should have noticed that straight away this is creating an image of discomfort and pain. Clearly the zookeeper is not in the best of health. And perhaps that's because he's been working so hard over the years looking after the animals. Perhaps it's just because he's getting old, okay? Occasionally, this aged man would stumble, emit a pained grunt, then continue. So again, we've got this adjective here, aged, okay, explicitly tells us that this man is quite old, perhaps nearing the end of his life. Would stumble and emit a pained grunt. We've got another dynamic verb here, suggesting that he's finding it quite difficult to move from A to B. He's finding it quite difficult to carry out his normal day-to-day activities and assume the running of the zoo. Pained, we've got this adjective here, and we've got this verb grunt. So again, we've got this auditory imagery coupled with this visual imagery. We can really picture this old zookeeper really quite struggling to go about his daily routine. The writer then goes on to describe the dented metal feed bucket in his fist, and this swung ponderously, banging against his knee. Now, some of you may have picked up on this adjective dented, okay? Perhaps this is suggesting that the diligence that the zookeeper once had is no longer to the same level. Why hasn't he replaced this metal feed bucket? Perhaps we can make a connection between the bucket and the zookeeper himself, okay? Perhaps he's dented, okay? His ill health, okay? Can we make some sort of connection between the bucket and his ill health? Maybe. We've got another dynamic verb here, swung, coupled with this adverb ponderously, and then this verb banging. again, it's creating this image of him being quite clumsy, not having the strength maybe to carry out his day-to-day tasks. Again, all very visual images being used. Then we've got the bones in his hand, the gnarled knuckles, ropey tendons. Again, very, very visual imagery being used here. We've got gnarled, so it really creates this image, rather unpleasant, painful image with his knuckles being quite twisted. Again, highlighting the fact that he's clearly been quite a hard worker, quite a tenacious worker throughout the years. And the veins stood out from the effort of carrying the heavy weight. So despite him having a dented metal bucket, despite him struggling, he's still trying his best to look after the animals, to make sure the zoo is running to the best that he can. Then the writer goes on to describe the tissue-thin skin and the fact that he was inhabited by ghosts of forgotten injuries and secret stories. Very, very sort of metaphorical language being used here. The tissue-thin skin, again, alluding to this idea of his health being very poor. And back to this metaphor here, inhabitants by ghosts of forgotten injuries. Perhaps this is alluding to him having accidents or his job taking a real toll on his health, his mental health maybe. This is where it gets interesting. So we've got the secret stories of wounds the boy would never know. Again, if you've been keeping up to date with Twitter, you will know that this has divided opinion. Is the boy human? This is the first hint that we get, okay? Why is it that the boy will never understand these secret stories or these injuries? Is it because he's just a boy, he's got to grow up? Or is it because he cannot connect emotionally with the zookeeper? He can't empathise yet anyway, okay? Is this a hint? Okay, that's for you to decide, okay? The boy wondered what it would feel like to hold that hand to touch the baggy covering. Baggy covering, again, is this another hint? Does the boy realise, again, perhaps this is for you to decide, does the boy realise that his skin is very different to the zookeeper's skin? Notice how the writer uses the term baggy covering, which is perhaps alluding to this silicone skin, which is mentioned later on in the text. Who knows? And feel it slide over the brittle bones beneath the fingers, the time-withered muscles. We've got this real sort of emotive ending here, lots of emotive language. Again, I've put here this idea that the insidious effects of working his whole life have slowly started to affect the zookeeper physically, mentally, emotionally. Quite a powerful opening, and it leaves us with lots of questions that we desperately need answering. To summarise, I mean, this paragraph is brilliant. Lots of language, lots of technique, lots of imagery, sensory imagery being used. The overall effect of the language, which no doubt you started your response with, again, seems to highlight the zookeeper's ill health, okay, and how it's sort of depleting or declining. And I would imagine all of your quotations and your discussions linked to that point. Hopefully that's helped. I will look at the second paragraph maybe this evening and look at the other questions soon. Thanks.